Okay. So the first question is, what were your feelings concerning the United States involvement in Vietnam?
Well, I came from a family that was very much for peace in general. My mother was in a group called Women's Strike for Peace before the Vietnam War started, and it was basically to end the buildup of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So when the war started, my family was immediately against the war. And so I, being of the age where you're influenced by your family, I was immediately against the war as soon as it started.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think of like the purpose, like of the war? Like, why do you think?
Well, I know the stated purpose was to stop what was called then the domino effect, which was like if Vietnam falls, that means Cambodia, Laos, and all of Southeast Asia would fall. And that's what they told us was the reason for the involvement. My feeling was that the United States, and this is still somewhat the case, wants to be an imperial force around the world, and that we didn't really have business in Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm. And then, did your view of the war change over time?
No, we just continued to be against the war more. I mean, for most people of my age who were at home and watching television, their view of the war did change when like the news media started saying, "Hey, wait a second, this isn't going so well. We can't believe what we're being told." And a lot of people did change their minds about the war, but we were already there, so it felt like we had more support for our ideas.
Okay. And what vivid memories do you have during that time period?
Oh, there are lots of them. One of them is like watching TV every night and seeing the war.
Yeah.
See, that's a big difference than today.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've been at war for like almost your entire life,
Yeah,
right?
You don't usually see it.
And you see nothing, right? Whereas in Vietnam, they would have reporters and cameras like with the troops that were like in the jungle and in firefights, and so you would see like the people getting killed, American soldiers getting killed, and I think that the military made the decision that they wouldn't allow that anymore, and that's one of the reasons why there isn't as much protest about the United States involvement in the Mideast right now, in Iran and in Iraq and Afghanistan, because we don't see it. It's distant.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's that nightly view of people being killed and maimed and injured. Another one was like when I was I think I was about your age, in your grade, and there was a plan to like walk out of school it was like at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, and the entire school left their classrooms. The teachers didn't necessarily support what we were doing. And we got up and we left and we went on a march around the town where my school was with anti-war signs. And it was early, I guess, in the war, and we were not well received by the population. And I was called a Hitler Youth. I was called lots of names. I still remember that as pretty fondly, actually. The other thing that's very vivid is like they had the draft then, and being subject to the draft, and my feelings about that, and what I was going to do about being drafted into the military if I was, and how I would deal with that. That was pretty strong.
Okay. And then I'm guessing, because they never really changed, but have they changed since 1973, kind of like once the end?
I still think it was a tremendous mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what lessons do you think for Americans that we can learn from the Vietnam experience?
Well, I think we would have learned more if we saw the pictures that we saw in Vietnam. I think that because there was a gap between the first Gulf War and the end of Vietnam, about 15 years between the first Gulf War, and people forgot what war was like, so they didn't really see it.
Yeah.
And I think if that memory would be more fierce. There would be a larger anti-war movement now if we saw those pictures. So I think the people that learned something were actually the military and the people that support American intervention around the world. They learned not to tell us or show us certain things. And the end of the draft has changed things too, because if you were in danger of going to Afghanistan to fight right now, you'd probably be a little bit more aware of what was going on and think about it and take action about it. But because it's an all-volunteer army, people your age and in college, they don't have a fierce feeling about it because they're not in jeopardy. And I sort of wish, that's another thing I think the military learned, that it's better to have a smaller all-volunteer army than a larger drafted force.
Okay. And then I wanted to show you this picture, if you know what that is.
Isn't that the end of our involvement in Vietnam, where like the last people leaving Saigon?
Yep. So then, like, my final question is, what do you remember about Saigon? What are your feelings towards that?
Well, we had been supposedly winding down the war for a while, right? Nixon came in and said he had a secret plan to stop the war in '68. And then in '72, he got elected again, saying he still had the secret plan to end the war, but he hadn't really. And they went through this process called Vietnamization, sort of like what they're doing in Afghanistan right now, like turning things over to the Vietnamese army, or the South Vietnamese army, rather than the Americans doing it. And they pretended that that was going to work for a while, but the realization that it wasn't was made very clear when we had to escape Saigon the way we did.
Yeah.
And I remember it being, I hope they get out. That was like my major worry about the deal.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, that was the
Helpful?
last one. It was.